It's a new day, oh, it's a new time, and there's a new way. I'm gonna live my life, oh, the old has passed away, and the new has come. Thank God, it's a brand new day.
Good evening. This evening we're going to be talking about the very important virtue of self-control that Peter lists in 2 Peter chapter 1 as one of those virtues that we need to have in our lives if we are going to make our calling and election sure, in Peter's words. We've already talked about faith, we've discussed moral excellence, we've looked at knowledge, and tonight again, self-control. And by the way, I think probably of all the Christian virtues that we're going to discuss here, one of the most difficult and one of the most challenging is self-control. Now, there's two types of control that I want you to consider with me for just a moment. One type of control is external. By external control, what am I talking about? I'm talking about parents, teachers, coaches, police, people that structure and order your life externally, that tell you what to do and what not to do. And those are very important factors in our lives. But the power of external control is limited, and the effect of external control is limited. What is really important is self-control, internal control. Because internal control is life-changing. Now, where does internal control come from? Well, I think in part it comes from the conscience that God has given to us, which tells us what to do and what not to do, but also from maturity, from growing and learning and facing the consequences of poor decisions and so on as we begin to develop self-control. But you see, it's self-control that's life-changing. Let me give you an example. You can take someone, for instance, who, let's say, is addicted to methamphetamines. And that addiction gets way out of control and they end up being arrested and they go to prison. Well, during the time this person is in prison, chances are they won't have any access to methamphetamines. And so during that period, they won't be using. External controls are taking care of that addiction. But too often, as soon as they get out, almost immediately they go back and they start using again. Why? Because they don't have the self-control that's necessary to deal with that addiction. That's why a program like FBTCC and the work that Mark Siebold is doing is so important. Because in essence, what Mark's trying to do is teach men not controlling their addiction through external controls, but rather through self-control. Now, when we talk about self-control, one of the things we have to understand is that appetites are very powerful. God made us to strongly desire certain things. He made us to strongly desire food, for instance. And that's one of the reasons why as Americans we struggle with ice cream and we struggle with chips and drinks and all that, because the appetites are so powerful that they can control us instead of us controlling them. That's a problem when it comes to all different kinds of challenges that we face as we deal with our appetites. But here's the thing. As Paul will say in 1 Corinthians 9 verse 27, I buffet my body every day. Why? Because I don't want to lose control of my desires. I want to live my life in a way that pleases God. And one of the challenges that all of us face is dealing with those very strong appetites and desires that God has placed within us, and not allowing them to dominate us, but rather us dominate them. And that's where self-control becomes so vitally important. Now, one of the things that we're going to be discussing this evening is how we can encourage each other and how we can help in developing self-control. And that's vital. That's so important. Let me suggest one thing, because I think it's just central to this whole deal, and that is the importance of example in this area. I don't care what Christian virtue you're talking about, and it certainly would include self-control. One of the best ways to learn how to live that virtue is to see it live before you, to have a positive example set for you. And that certainly holds true when it comes to self-control. I think one of the most important things that you and I can do as brothers and sisters in Christ is encourage each other in these Christian virtues and seek to set a proper example for each other in these Christian virtues. My wife's a great lady, and she has done a tremendous blessing for me in her setting an example for me when it comes to self-control. She is very self-controlled when it comes to her diet and what she eats and the way she eats. And she's very self-controlled when it comes to exercising on a regular basis. In fact, she shames me real often, but that's good. I need that. Her positive example challenges me and encourages me and helps me in this area. And I think that's exactly what, as brothers and sisters in Christ, we need to do for each other. We need to hold each other accountable, and we need to set a proper example for each other when it comes to this incredibly important virtue of self-control. And so I would encourage you to share your thoughts this evening, and let's learn and gain some ways in which, as Christians, we can live out this virtue of self-control. May God bless you in the time you spend together this evening. Thank you.
It's a new day, oh, it's a new time, and there's